Princess Eliana first noticed the human because he never looked at her the way the others did. Not with fear, not with hunger, not with the careful calculation that ruled the palace of stars. He stood at the edge of her father's war chamber in a dark service uniform with no jeweled rank. No family crest, no visible ambition. And while admirals bowed and ministers flattered and courtiers performed loyalty like theater, he only listened, silent as iron, his hands folded behind his back as if the fate of empires had already disappointed him once. They told her his name was Jonas Vale, senior household retainer, a human survivor of the siege of Halcyon, taken into royal service for discipline, and she believed what every princess was raised to believe, that any capable man standing near a crown must belong to it. She was wrong. And the dead knew it before she did, at 19. Eliana had inherited the elegance of House Sereth. Silver eyes, a spine built by etiquette and expectation. She had been trained to spot weakness in diplomats and rebellion in officers. Yet Jonas gave her nothing she could name. He attended state dinners without touching the wine, stood through military briefings without asking to sit, vanished into the underlevels whenever ceremonies ended, and wore on a chain beneath his collar a strip of blackened metal no scanner in the palace registry could identify. Once she asked whether it had belonged to his mother. He answered, "No, Highness, it belonged to a city." The answer irritated her for days because it sounded less like grief and more like an oath. Then the funeral ships arrived from Vera 9. 32 black carriers drifting into the capital without music, without banners, without triumph. The royal communique called it a contained insurgency and regrettable losses. But Eliana saw the wounded unloaded through restricted docks, saw children wrapped in emergency foil, saw human mechanics with burned hands staring at the palace towers. And that night, when the court raised crystal goblets to another victory, she saw Jonas lower his eyes as if the word itself had struck him like an insult. He did not serve the living celebration. He served something colder. The truth moved when Eliana followed him through maintenance, passages beneath the eastern wing, and found him in an old memorial vault where no servant had authority to enter, kneeling before rows of name plaques that did not belong to royals. Miners, medics, engine crews, cargo pilots, school teachers, colonists, thousands of them, some from worlds the Empire had never publicly admitted losing. And Jonas was speaking to them in a voice so low it seemed built for ghosts, giving report, requesting forgiveness, promising remembrance. She should have denounced him. Any secret registry outside the throne's archives was treason. Any human who kept count of imperial dead was more dangerous than a fleet. But instead she stood in the doorway and listened as he recited names for nearly an hour. Not only the honored dead, but the erased. Those listed as collateral. Those buried under revised reports. Those burned in domes. Those vented when stations were cleansed to secure shipping lanes. When he finally noticed her, he did not reach for a weapon. He simply rose and waited. "Why keep this place?" she asked. "Why risk execution for the dead?" And Jonas looked at the plaques like some people looked at home. "Because someone must answer when they are forgotten." He said, "Your family rules by archives, princess. Delete a record. And they call it peace. Alter a number. And they call it necessity. Rename the dead. And they call it history, but humans. We bury our promises with our people. And if the living betray them, then we serve the fallen until justice catches up." The palace had hired a servant, but the fallen had kept their soldier. The next morning, the court glittered as always. Music in the upper halls, admirals wrapped in medals. Her father beneath a crown that fractured starlight into obedient colors. And for the first time Eliana saw it all as Jonas must have seen it. A machine built to survive its own conscience. Then the alarms cut across the ceremony. Frontier transmitters had gone dark again. This time, not from rebels, but from soldiers. Occupation wings refusing command, memorial codes flooding fleet channels, casualty ledgers unlocking across the defense net. names spilling into public view faster than censorship could silence them. Every erased colony, every falsified report, every mass grave hidden beneath imperial language. Ministers shouted. Officers demanded signal suppression. The emperor rose in fury. And Elianya turned just as Jonas entered the chamber with smoke on his coat and blood along one sleeve. Not his own, he had seized the archive spires below. Palace guards had stood down rather than fire on civilians gathered in the courtyards. And above the jeweled ceiling appeared the faces of the dead. Her father thundered that Jonas's veil was a servant of the crown, bound by oath, clothed by royal mercy, sustained by royal bread, and the human smiled then. Small, tired, almost kind. No, Majesty, he said. I stood near your throne because that is where the names were stolen. I accepted your roof because that is where the records were buried. I wore your colors because it brought me closer to the hands that signed the forgetting. You thought I served your family because your family believes proximity is loyalty. But humans are not loyal to power first. We are loyal to the fallen who paid for every lie the powerful can afford to tell. The silence that followed was not fear, it was judgment. What happened after entered history under many names? The reckoning broadcast, the night of open ledgers, the first honest dawn. But Elianya remembered only the sound of names being spoken aloud by millions across the worlds. Names once hidden, now impossible to bury again. Some say she chose her side in that chamber. Some say the side chose her when she stepped down from the dais and stood beside the human her family had mistaken for property. She stood beside him because she finally understood what royalty had failed to teach her. That service was not obedience. That duty was not performance. That honor did not belong to crowns unless crowns knelt before truth. And when the royal guard asked for her command, Princess Elianya looked up at miners, children, medics, and unnamed bones, and answered, "Open every vault. Read every name. Let the fallen come home."